Hello and welcome to ArtShow. I'm Craig Stover, and today I have with me Kristopher Benedict. Hello, Chris. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Very good. I wanted to start by sharing some works of yours. So I went on your website, which was quite extensive, and I chose some images that I thought were sort of outstanding pieces. And I know this particular one goes quite a while back.
Yeah, wow.
Um, but I think I like the idea of showing this and your more current work as well. Um, this was a very painterly painting. I really enjoyed this particular piece. I love the tonalities of it. I'm guessing there's a little bit of a story behind this picture. Can you
Sure.
can
Yeah.
can you tell me about it?
Yeah. So this one was part of my first solo show and I had it. I think I was the first solo show of a gallery called the Jeff Bailey Gallery when they first opened up. And this is probably 2003, I think,
Hmm.
2002 or 2003. And I was right out of grad school. So I was, 24 years old, or I was, really young. It's fun to see this again. I haven't looked at it in a long time. But
And
that
it's big.
exhibition, yeah, it's pretty big, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the exhibition is called was called Park Paintings, and um, I was sort of interested in the park as this as a kind of like a fabricated, constructed landscape that held a
Hmm.
lot of kind of like cultural ideas about what landscape is and what its use could be. And so so I was using imagery from different parks, mostly from Central Park, and then from this park, which was something that was under construction outside of a science museum in Valencia, Spain, that I had visited earlier that year when I was doing a residency in Europe. And so, yeah, and so it was just sort of contrasting ideas about what a park could be, and the sort of like Olmsted
Hmm.
vibes, kind of Central Park, kind of a sense of kind of romance or picturesque. Again, something like this, which felt a little bit more, I don't know, sort of under construction and contemporary. And I think the way that I was handling the paint and building the picture was sort of trying to put these different ideas kind of at odds with each other and create some tension.
Well, I love the way that you handled the paint. And what I found, the reason I chose this one and some of your more current works is I can still see the way you handle paint in a lovely way. It's almost like I often think of like Philip Guston, his fumbling line that he has is just such a
Yeah.
beautiful way to make a mark. And I was thrilled to see it in this, but then I was also thrilled to see it reappear much,
Oh,
much
wow.
later, but in a completely different context because your storyline is completely changed by this point.
Yeah. Oh,
This
wow.
one I really liked because of the layering that you were able to do. This is like a meaty painting to me. Like I have
Yeah,
to like
sure.
really stare at this. What
Yeah.
what actually am I staring at?
You're
It's
saying
like
that a lot of layering. Yeah, you're right. I mean, this is um like it's interesting because a lot of times I'm building like one painting will lead to the next to kind of create like a body of work, right? And so if you pull work from different eras, they look so different to me. It's sort of like it's fun to see. I have to almost like kind of remember where I was at the time
right.
and the role that I saw, to kind of know what's kind of in there. But yeah,
Uh-huh.
it's a lot of superimposed imagery. So the I think that one second, the dog is at the door.
That happens. So I'll just vamp while he's getting
Sorry
his
about
dog.
that. We
That's
said
okay.
that that might happen, and it did. Um,
So
yeah,
I'm what I was seeing in this, I mean, my first vision was, seashells,
yes.
but underneath, I couldn't, it's so obscured. I couldn't, I saw landscape, but I couldn't tell if I was imagining it or
Yeah, yeah,
did it
that's it. So
matter?
I
Does it really
like
matter what's underneath all that?
it does and it doesn't. So that's something that I actually think about a lot with my paintings. It's something that I'm wrestling with all the time, which is that like as the painter, I have this privileged kind of understanding of the painting that the viewer doesn't have, and how much do I want to reveal of that,
Hmm.
history, and and also just sort of like really paying attention to how much that kind of secret knowledge that I have influences what I see in the end that the viewer might not see.
Yeah.
It's a good
Yeah.
example of kind of like what like I'd like to kind of push things to to their sort of natural endpoints or something. So this is definitely one that was sort of the overlaying of imagery kind of felt really saturated, and ultimately it was shells, and there was a little bit of a landscape underneath it. But yeah, but that's the thing.
That's also
Yeah,
why I chose this picture.
yeah,
Oops,
interesting.
keeps going backwards. Sorry. Um, this one in particular, I think is even, it's probably one of the more successful paintings I said. Now, I don't think this is very large, right?
No, that is a big one actually.
Is
Yeah,
it?
yeah, yeah,
Um, so I was mistaken on that regard, but the way that you're weaving your images together on this is done differently than the other ones. You're not just layering them, you're weaving them on this.
yeah.
So, and I love the fact that you left the hand in the bottom left corner as a like an entry point, but then it turns into total confusion,
Yeah.
which I love because now I'm like, all right, I'm gonna get this one. I'm gonna figure this one out. So where
Good.
did this occur?
Yeah, this is I love that you're like the way that you're talking about it and the way that you're thinking about entry points. That's very close to how I think about it too. Sort of leaving different ways that the viewer can kind of access the painting, and different ways to go to come into the space, and then what happens. There
Yeah,
is there's a couple of different images layered. I'm using a projector for this body of work, so they're actually built out of small drawings that I make and then
I'm gonna
blown
ask you
up really
how you
large.
did that.
And there's something really nice about that because you can get a kind of like you can get there's a kind of like calligraphic mark that you can kind of find when you're in the dark, kind of tracing a projector, that actually is sort of freeing in terms of
Yeah,
mark
it
making
is.
and like
I agree
um
completely.
and
Well,
and all the work really for unless like that park painting series way
uh,
back when I was a youngster. Ever since then, the paintings have really gotten much more um, flexible in terms of my process and knowing what the end point is supposed to be. And
mhm.
so you can see at different stages, like if you were to have this painting and turn it around a few times upside down on its side, you'd start to maybe be able to pick out different images. The
Yeah.
final one is this figure of a man reading a book, a scholar reading a book,
Okay.
and yeah, sort of a little bit of a metaphor. But that image was there was a flood in my studio that year, and a lot of my like drawings and little computer printouts got
Mhm,
damaged in a way
mhm.
that was kind of in some ways kind of lucky, and I kind of interpreted some of that water damage too, sort of, so the
Mm,
image
okay.
degraded and layered a bunch of different times.
I
Yeah.
can see it. I what got me excited about this picture, and this is the painter in me talking. It was the fact that there was the hand entry point, but the entire picture all the way around forces you to stay inside the picture. There's no escapes out. You know, that first one we talked about, my eye went in and out of the
Sure.
picture. Once I'm into this picture, you got me. Like I'm not getting out of it. And I love that manipulation of the viewer. Um,
Yeah.
but something a little bit different, way more current now, right?
Yeah.
This is your new body of work or
Yeah, more
newish.
or less. Yeah, the last few years for sure.
So for me, what's interesting is as I've looked at your work, your body of work, that the narrative almost seems to over the years sort of fade away, whereas it seems like you've become a lot more interested in creativity or imagination or the structures of the paintings rather than the meanings of the paintings.
Yeah.
Am I on board there, or am I way am I missing it?
Yeah, I think, in some ways, like there's maybe, I would say, how would I put it? Maybe there's more interest in, maybe there's less sort of prescribed meaning going in. You know what I mean? There's more of I think I'm more interested overall in kind of, what happens during the process of trying to create, some meaning or some content, or, like how is a painting kind of, yeah, talking to us, and what can it do, and in the past, sometimes like there's been, I'll find a sense of direction, and then the work will, I'll make work that will fit that topic, or will point in that direction. And sometimes there's, I guess with a painting like this, and with some of the more recent work that I've done, I'm sort of looking to like I'm looking to expand the vocabulary of the painting. I'm looking for different forms and different ways of making a painting, you know.
Hmm.
And then ultimately, when I feel like it's under control and I kind of know what I'm doing with it, then I feel like I can maybe talk more specifically about a certain topic or something like that. But there is imagery buried in here, and it has been through a lot of revisions over time. The white here was sort of the black and white entering the palette was a really cool discovery because especially in JPEG form, it looks really reductive and like kind of clean. In person, you're gonna see all the, you know, a lot of kind of like it was not nearly as like as clean cut and
Hmm.
or neatly arrived
Right.
at as it might appear in this. There's texture and revisions and things going on underneath.
I think your work is the kind of work that it should be seen in person. I mean, there's
Yeah.
not only the scale, but the layering of these pictures. I want that as well. You can't get that on a screen.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I finally, this is the last piece I wanted to show is this one. Now this is very current.
Yeah, very current. Never been shown, never been out of the studio. So I'm
Okay.
excited to share it with with you and whoever's watching here. That's great.
So you know, the idea that there's the lamp structure in there,
Right.
and then it to me it almost looks at some point you've adopted like some imagery, but then you like ignore it while you work on something that's almost completely different, where you know
Yeah.
like you're no longer talking about a structure, you're talking about almost like talking about paint and the qualities of
Hmm.
paint and what they can do, but then finding that happiness between them. There's a lot in here to pull out. Is there any secret story behind this particular picture?
Yeah, I mean this one is really it's also a large one, which I think most of the ones that you pulled out were kind of larger paintings, but it's a real this is definitely one where it's a shame not to be there with it. It's one that I would love to like go up and point to different areas of the painting and like
Mm-hmm.
and there's a lot of different types of surface and texture built up. The blue on the left that yeah, I see as a kind of like lamp. I see this as a kind of like
Mm-hmm.
magic lamp, kind of Aladdin
Mm-hmm.
story, you know?
Mm-hmm.
um that's a really slick surface. That's got a lot of like stand oil in it, and it's real
Okay.
shiny, glossy, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you move to the right, it kind of fractures and fractalizes, and there's a lot of like raw pigment on top of the surface. The surface goes through all these different changes, in other words. And like part of how the if there is a kind of like I sort of see on the right a face and a lamp on the left, but that imagery is very much kind of like broken apart and kind of falling apart or kind of being put back together by some of the kind of strange painting surfaces
Mm.
and different kind of yeah, yeah, just different kinds of approaches that are this real. I mean, almost this was another one um like the shells painting that you showed before. That painting
Mm-hmm.
was one where I felt like what happens if I just layer this beyond the point of
Right.
ridiculousness. And I feel
Right.
like this was another one recently where I was like what happens if I take this like vocabulary, this kind of way that I'm working, and just don't stop where I feel comfortable, like
Yeah.
keep going and see what happens.
Yeah, I find either artists stop too soon or they stop too late. But I've also found, in my own experience, I think you might find this, Joe, if you stop too late but then keep going, you get second and wins in that picture. Like, so
Yeah, you
I'm
hope.
curious to know about the fact that many of your pictures talk about the that you use both acrylic and oil.
Yeah.
Are you doing that because of the effects that each one gives you, or is there another benefit that I'm
Yeah,
not seeing?
I found that the paintings were going through so many changes over time. Like they're really slow paintings. Actually, I like how they have like an immediate first impression, and I think about that. But I really want my viewer to spend almost as much time with them as I do. I love painting as like a domestic object, something you could sit with and live with for a long time.
Yeah.
And so I'm building up these layers, and each painting is going through all these different changes because it sort of just the way, just, you know, I'm just sort of demanding that the painting kind of is flexible that way. And so I found that actually starting a painting with kind of a rough acrylic kind of ground that's almost kind of like spontaneous. I'm, using a spray bottle and
Hmm.
putting the paint down kind of gesturally.
Like
I
an
know that it'll be
underpainting?
under, I know that'll be an underpainting. I know that very little of it necessarily needs to stay there in the end. Um, but it helps kind of it helps kind of move the process along. And then there's a nice, I think about color a lot, as you might like imagine from seeing the work. And there's something like um, the real saturated acrylic color kind of creates a nice like dialogue with the oil paint. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm either forced to kind of amp up the chroma and the saturation of the oil paint to match what's underneath it, or I am intentionally working in a more muted way to kind of work against some of the
Yeah.
intensity of that ground.
I know what
But
you
we're
mean
kind of
about
grounded.
that. Just there's layers of undercolors. You know
Yeah,
they're going to be wiped out, but you need them to begin with. Every time I do that, I always think about that de Kooning quote where he says the first thing he does is he takes a white canvas and he ruins it like with a
yeah,
charcoal line just so it's not white, so he could then fix it. It's like, okay,
exactly.
now I understand where he's coming from on that.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to start our other conversation about early on, before you were an artist. Did you ever have like a first exposure to art that you still remember?
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, we can, I mean, I don't know how early you want to go.
As what was the
Like,
biggest, what
I,
pops into your head first is the most important, I found.
yeah, I mean, I grew up in a place where there wasn't, the idea of like fine art or, museum art or whatever was not something that I had a lot of access to necessarily. So my introduction was really through comic books and I loved drawing comics and I loved the kind of escape of that when I was growing up. But I don't know, there's something kind of like, like when you say that, I remember like a Happy Meal, like box that had like some moose on it and like a
Uh-huh.
sunset scene. And I mean, I think we've just like, this is a good Zoom therapy session. I just unlocked some kind of core memory of that. But I remember kind of looking into that, like kind of the beauty of that Happy Meal sunset or something.
Uh-huh.
And there's that. I had Mad magazines too when I was really, really young, and I
Okay.
remember trying to copy some of those and sending them
Right.
in. But that was
I
the
asked that because
yeah,
I always find that there's sometimes like a little kernel that then
sure,
even the artist doesn't realize. So as soon as you mention comic books, I
yeah,
immediately think of saturated colors and
yeah.
the fact that you use a lot of those saturated
Oh,
colors.
for sure. And that is sort of, I mean, those the that those initial sort of visual interests, they don't go away. And it's funny how you sort of try to, like, when you're a younger artist, you maybe try to hide them. I would hide, like, there's something also kind of fundamental to how I draw that just sort of like comes out of that world of like how learning how to draw like the Marvel way or something.
Right.
And so for a long time I kind of tried to bury it and
Yeah.
get rid of the drawing, and then at some point you sort of decide, well, that's who I am and it's cool, and might as
Yeah.
well own it. And so
So
yeah, a lot of color and line work.
as you progressed through the years, um, you probably had a number of influential teachers.
Yeah.
My question is was there any one in particular that really catapulted you, or was it like a combination of everybody combined?
I had so many amazing teachers over the years. No, I
Did you?
couldn't name one. I mean, if I named one, I'd feel bad about not naming
Okay.
five.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I'm
no,
not trying
but
to despair.
I've had amazing teachers, amazing friends and colleagues, and you know what I mean? Like it's
Hmm.
really, I feel very like yeah, like I've had a lot of help along the way, and a lot of been so lucky to kind of learn from all sorts of different people, but every level along the way. I had a great high school teacher, undergrad, grad school, out of school, great people to kind of emulate and learn from that are friends. So it's been, yeah, it's been a number of them.
That's good to know. Even that helps shape my understanding of your work. I want to talk a little bit about your process.
Yeah.
First question, real simple. Do you keep sketchbooks?
No.
No, don't even bother. Do
I
you ever
wish I do.
sketch out
I buy
anything?
sketchbooks. I buy sketchbooks all the time, and I don't use them. I buy those college ruled lined things as if I'm gonna all of a sudden turn into a poet or start journaling, and I don't do that either. I love spending money on this stuff apparently. I collect imagery. If more than anything, I'm like taking screenshots on my phone all the time, and I'm
Mm,
collecting imagery from Google searches. So I'm a big
okay.
gatherer of pictures.
Do
And
you do you have like a binder of resource
yeah,
materials then? Or
yeah, I do.
binders?
Yeah, I do. I have multiple like shoe boxes full of imagery that I've printed out, and I hate like in the studio, I try to ditch the phone as much as I can, and so that's really why I'm printing out as much imagery as I can too, and so that I don't have to like hold the phone while I paint or try to refer to the phone when I'm using
Mm,
photographic imagery, which does come in occasionally. So yeah, so it's a lot of printing them out, and then also sort of drawing from the printouts and then painting from the drawings. So I'm big into this idea of trying to like meet any kind of source imagery that I have, trying to mediate away from it somehow, so that I can kind of distill it into something that I want to use in a painting and avoid the temptation of kind of um, you know rendering something from a photograph directly.
when you're going to make something new, is it the source materials that catapult your creativity, or do you already walk into the studio with some basic ideas and then you're looking for the materials to support that?
Yeah, hopefully the goal is that the body of work starts telling me what to do. And
Okay.
so the hope is that at some point through experimenting or having completed one body of work and trying to move on to the next one, that there'll be like a set of kind of new rules and new concerns and new process ideas that are kind of happening in the studio gonna that's gonna like get me moving in a certain direction. But so there's that, and prior to that, the experimentation really has to do more with formal things, lately anyway, has to do more with formal things about the painting process than it does about connecting to a specific type of imagery. I'll be like, I really want to make a big dumb blue painting, and that'll be the start of it, rather than in
That's
the
a great
past where
title, by
maybe
the
I've
way.
in the past where I've had like a stack of images that I really wanted to work with, and I knew what that was, and I knew how presenting that was going to, I knew how I was going to present the end result before I even started the body of work, kind of,
Hmm.
and the longer I work, the less I'm doing that.
Over the years, have or I guess I should say, how have you seen your creative process change over the years?
Yeah. Um,
Has it at all?
It definitely has, but it's again, this is sort of where we get into like a therapy session or something, because I feel like it's very much tied to my life. You know what I mean? I guess
So
so it's
does
like
that mean
how
that
life.
you can do you consider your work to be autobiographical then, if it's tied to your life so quickly?
Yeah, I think ultimately it winds up being very autobiographical in kind of obscure ways that are hard, that wouldn't necessarily go on the press release of the work that I'm showing. But I
Hmm.
think from my perspective, I do relate sort of the decisions that I make there and the directions that I wind up going to sort of personal things that are happening or life things that are happening, or like, how sometimes you have more your ability to spend time with the work that you're making kind of goes through these different changes over time too. And so, like if I'm working part-time and spending a lot of time in the studio and get a lot of daylight hours there, maybe the work goes in one direction. And
Hmm.
if other things are happening, maybe the work changes to suit that. So I don't know. So it's changed. Um, I think over time, I've talked a lot about it today with you about this idea of the body of work being this determining factor. And I think over time, that's me. I'm maybe shifting slowly away from that as a model and more thinking about this individual paintings where I'm finding that I'm spending so much more time on single paintings than I used to.
Hmm.
My process as a whole is really slowing down, not in terms of like my hours in the studio, but in terms of how much I'm staying in on one piece
Hmm.
and how much I'm asking one piece to go through these different changes and tell bigger stories than I think I used to. I used to
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
to think about them as chapters in a bigger book, and now each one is sort of becoming more of a
Yeah.
complete
Well, I can
story.
see it, looking at your work, I do see that it does seem to get more complex as you go
Yeah,
along.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know when when somebody ends up owning a piece of your work, is there a compulsion in you to make sure that the work is explained to them, or can you just like, okay, they own it, goodbye, it's gone.
Yeah, I'm happy that it's gone.
Okay. So whether they know the explanation doesn't matter. That's
There's
they
so
can
I
work on
make,
that.
I'm happy that it's gone. I want it gone. I want it gone. I get it's fun when I talk to other artists and students and things like that who they love their work and they want to, they don't even want to sell it because they want to hold on to it. But I feel like the more I'm spending more time with them as I getting older or whatever, or these days, and I'm hating them more. Like I just want them out. Like by the time I spend all that time, I'm like, get
Right.
now, I'm done with you. So I don't want to
Well,
see
maybe
it
is that
ever again.
because they're affecting your newer work and you don't want that?
Yeah, it's because I've just like given I feel like it's, we've spent enough time together. Now it's time to move on. Like, it's time to move on. But no, I'm sort of joking. The how much of the story they need to know is sort of, as like I said, it's something that I'm thinking about a lot these days, actually, because I want, in some ways, I want them to see it. I want the viewer, I want the audience to see it from my perspective. And on the other hand, I know that they can't. And
Yeah.
so I'm thinking about different strategies to do that. I'm thinking about how I might present that in different ways, or how to kind of how to leave entry points or kind of focal points to lead the viewer through the painting in certain ways.
Hmm.
But I just like this idea that a painting is kind of um, complex enough that you could spend time with it, and you're cooking dinner next to this painting for 10 years, and then you notice something that
Suddenly
you've never
there's
seen
something
before.
there.
it's,
Yeah.
it's a new painting,
Yeah.
and
I've
it
hidden
happens to
stuff in
me.
my work too. And I don't tell people like for 10 years, and then I'll show up and be
Yeah.
like, oh, by the way, there's a figure there. What? Kind of a thing. I love
And that
doing
happens a lot. That happens a lot to me in my life, where I notice these things. I love it. And I've had people say things like, "Oh, I love the bird in that painting."
that.
And
Right.
I don't know a bird. If there's a bird,
Okay.
I'm like,
Right.
yeah, that was
Right.
great. That bird means a lot to me.
Unfortunately, we only have time for one more question. I have like 50 more questions for you now. I love talking to you. So simple. What does making art do for you?
Yeah. It's I think it's a dialogue with people, with other people. And so making art for me puts me in conversation with um, people, artists in the past, friends of mine that are artists, people who are becoming artists. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
I really see it as a thing where I appreciate the solitary quality of being a painter. I like that. I
Hmm.
don't think I would be a good like movie director or something, because I'd have to talk to people
Hmm.
and sort of get my ideas across to them. I think something about the short, in some ways it's a short attention span game. You can have quick bursts of energy and then a lot of looking, and you don't have to sustain things the same way as other mediums. So I think that works well for me, and I like doing that in private. But I think I really like the idea that I'm talking to people and that it connects me. I like the connection that it gives me ultimately.
That's fantastic. Well, Chris, I can't thank you enough for coming by and talking with me
Yeah.
today about your work. Big fan of your work. I can't wait to see it in person. I also want to thank everybody who tuned in to watch Art Show today. We really appreciate your support. Make sure to like and, of course, subscribe because that helps push Art Show forward. So we can't thank you enough for watching today. And again, Chris, thank you very much. That was
This was
wonderful.
great. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.